The prison industrial complex is a term used to describe the overlapping of government and industry that use surveillance, policing, and imprisonment as solutions to what are in actuality economic, social and political problems. This is something that has become quite an epidemic throughout the United States as we have the highest incarceration rate in the world right here in America, more than Russia, China, Iran, authoritarian regimes which we consider to be cruel and unusual, but right here at home we have all these issues present. This industrial complex, the prison industrial complex, begins in 1973 with President Richard Nixon, who declares a war on drugs and declares drugs as public enemy number one. From there, we go to the 80s, where the rhetoric of the 70s is turned into action with President Ronald Reagan as he passes the Anti Drug Abuse Act, which makes a distinction between crack versus cocaine, which is the same drug, but crack is the cheaper form, which was criminalized harsher, and mandatory sentencing was implemented. And this led to mass incarceration, primarily in minority neighborhoods, which in act disproportionately affected African Americans as well as Latinos. Furthermore, he allocated roughly 1.7 billion to increase the movement or policing towards this war on drugs, and it really went to the next level throughout the 80s. As we look to the 90s, we see Bush Sr., who furthers this even more, and he holds up a bag of crack cocaine in 1990, which he says was being sold outside of the White House, which in fact was really set up by the Secret Service to just further escalate this war and sway public opinion on this epidemic that they were giving this perception to the public that this was what was going on. And then he allocates 1 billion more to this war on drugs. Then we have President Clinton, who really has this big comprehensive bill. As Republicans have been controlling the White House for years, Democrats feel they have to be tough on crime as well. And he signs the crime bill, which was one of the most comprehensive criminal justice bills ever passed, in which he allocates billions and billions of dollars to build prisons, to increase police departments, and ultimately, this bill increases incarceration rates to numbers that are truly detrimental to especially the African American community, where many families were left with single parent households and fathers were taken away, and it was quite a disaster for communities throughout America. Furthermore, roughly 97% of crimes never went to trial for African Americans, as the perception of African American men, especially throughout the media, labeled them as criminals. And the First Lady of the US in the 90s, Hillary Clinton, labeled African Americans as super predators. And this rhetoric really led to a massive increase in the way African Americans were looked at throughout the 90s, and has led to this massive incarceration and perception of the African American community. Lastly, to just get a look at how much the criminal justice system and the prison population has increased, you could look from the 70s, it was roughly about 200,000 or so. And as we look to today, there are about 2 million to 3 million people incarcerated. So over the course of the last 20 to 30 years, the prison population has steadily